Well, welcome back to our community. Susie Thomas, hanging out with Todd Biss and Jack Harris, talking about young life, reminiscing about some fun days, and actually we've got 50 years of it to reminisce about. Todd, tell me a little bit, what does young life look like today? What does a club meeting look like? I'm thinking skits and singing and just a lot of laughing. Tell me what happens.
Here's what's fascinating. It's exactly the same.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, I can validate that.
Yes.
This concept that was started long ago about creating an environment that's welcoming to everyone has continued. And there are a few alterations. There are a few skits that have been eliminated that aren't allowed to be done any longer. We might poke a little bit of fun at that at this 50-year anniversary. I think that could be kind of fun, too.
I'd love to know which ones.
Come and find out.
Okay. Okay.
Come and find out what we're no longer allowed to do.
Oh, man.
But yeah, it's exactly that. A lot of humor, a lot of skits and music and things to just kind of break down the walls. And then followed up by a talk, followed up by a humorous yet precise and accurate presentation of the gospel, and that has not changed for 50 years.
Yeah. What would be the ultimate goal? Because you get these kids, okay, say an unchurched kid finds their way to a Young Life club meeting. They're like, oh my goodness, Jesus is real and he loves me. What's next for that person? Do you want to get them plugged into a local church, or what do you do and how do you do that?
Yeah, 100%. Jack, you can talk on this too, but we regularly say if you have a church that you attend, get more involved. If you have a family church that you've been, maybe your family's been hit or miss in attendance, get plugged back in. We want to encourage that. If you don't, and you don't have family members who are involved and you're searching for a place, we can give you some direction about churches that maybe some of our volunteer leaders are involved in.
We've had a number of volunteer leaders take the kids to their church and introduce them around, help them feel comfortable in that structure.
Do you ever hear this, that a child who really was raised in the church, but they come to Young Life and that's where they meet Jesus? Have you ever had that? You ever hear that as a testimony?
All the time.
Interesting.
The time. Yeah, and in fact, we have churches that we partner with pretty closely who have said, we have some kids in our church that are not connecting with our youth group, and we feel like Young Life would be a good fit to get them interested in the Lord. And they have plugged them in, and through that ministry have gotten re-involved and reconnected.
How many people over the years do you meet who say, oh, that's where I found the Lord? I mean, you must hear this all the time.
I lost track of the numbers a long time ago.
And isn't it interesting where they are in the community? I mean, you see a lot of people in the community, and then you say Young Life, and it just goes forever. That is, you're suddenly related almost, right? Talk about that a little bit. Talk about the relationships that you've gotten to see build through this.
Well, it's always a surprise when you mention Young Life. Say, oh, yeah, I went to this camp, or I went there, or I was involved in this other city where I grew up. And it's like you've met another member of your family. There's just that kind of common connection that, oh, this is a brother I didn't know, this is a sister I didn't know. And then you'll take, no matter what you're doing, you'll take a few minutes, you'll swap some stories about the camp you went to, the club you went to, or this skit, or I really remember this song, oh, they did this that time. And the relationship is instantaneous, and you kind of grow from there.
It's kind of cool. So you talking there, Jack, reminded me. Jack and I had the privilege of traveling to Guatemala just recently, and we did some photography and video production. Jack helped carry a lot of gear. It's kind of a long story, but basically we ended up shooting in Guatemala City for Young Life. And so to go there and see the same types of things that we see here, it's about relationship building. And we watched their staff person go to soccer games and go to a skate park and go to a breakdancing, place where kids were doing that stuff, and do that contact work is what Young Life calls it, where you're just going to where kids are, and it happens cross-culturally, and it happens in other countries, and it's really comes down to relationship, and
that's amazing.
It's just cool to see it in other places.
We sat in on a club that was actually held on the porch of that area director's home, and other than the language difference, it could have been any club we held here.
Exactly.
Amazing. What do you need? Do you need volunteers? Do you need, I'm sure there's some finances that are necessary. There always are. What do you need to keep Young Life thriving and growing in this area?
Well, why don't I hit on the volunteers, Jack? You can hit on the finances.
Okay.
So for us, we have a great collection of volunteers. Many of them are college students, but many of them aren't. We have young professionals. We have moms and dads with young kids. We have folks whose kids are out of the house and who have just seen what an impact they can have on a young person's life. And so obviously to continue to grow, we want to continue to add volunteer leaders.
I want to get to money, but I want to peel this back first as
Sure.
far as the volunteers. You said earlier that there's 60-year-olds doing volunteer work with these young people, and that doesn't matter. How are people from a generation of the 70s able to relate and talk the language of young people right now in 2019?
So what's fascinating is sometimes we don't always talk the language correctly.
No, as soon as you try and say something cool, they have stopped saying that.
It's no longer cool.
Don't even
and they're
try.
on to something else,
Oh,
right?
it sounds worse.
But what
They
I've
even use the term cool.
Yeah.
but what we
Was
have
that lit? Is anything lit anymore?
Yeah, that's a
It's
great question.
serious.
So what we found though is that when you genuinely kids are smart. When you
Yeah.
genuinely care about them
Yes.
and they see that you're not in it for some other purpose or hidden agenda, then they will absolutely open up to you. And I was a leader for quite a while in the 80s and then took a break while we started our family and then got re-involved as a leader in the late 2000s. And I remember my first time being at a fall weekend thinking, how does this work as a 40-plus-year-old guy hanging out with these,
Yeah.
15, 16, 17-year-old boys? Will they have any interest in what I have to say whatsoever? And it did not take long at all for them to say, oh, wow, this guy is actually genuine and really cares about us. And there was no hesitation whatsoever about them sharing our lives together. So it was really cool.
That is very cool. And cool, I think, is the one word, the exception to the rule,
It
because
does
that's
continue to
you
be used.
say it in a different tone of voice.
Right.
There used to be cool, and there was cool, and there's cool. So different decades say it differently,
But it's
that's
still
the word that
cool.
seems
The
to
word.
transcend time.
Yeah, right.
But I am fascinated that it's the authenticness and it's the genuineness that they can spot. We don't have to walk in trying to be them. They'd be
if
first
we
to call
have-
us out on it.
If we have people who are 50 or 60 and aren't interested in running with kids or
Yeah.
something like that, we can use volunteers in so many other capacities.
Like
We
what?
have a committee that meets monthly that kind of oversees the total operation. We have some subcommittees. We have a subcommittee each year that spends a few months working on our annual fundraising banquet. We have a subcommittee each year that works on putting together our May golf fundraiser activity. We have we call TDS, all that name's changing, Taking Donors Seriously, which is a finance committee. We're looking for people to serve on that aren't on our regular committee. There's lots of where someone can just plug in to help with some activity, a little bit part of each year, or they can get involved year round, or there's lots of different things they can do where we can pick
of
on their
ways.
gifts, their abilities.
So whatever your gift and ability is,
We
it can
have a
get
place for
plugged
you,
in.
yes.
Yes. All right. Now
100%.
let's talk money now. How do we fund all of this?
We
There's a great golf outing. It just
do a
happened.
great golf outing, in which we get a large amount of money from that. We have that's in May of each year. We have a fall banquet fundraiser that we use for that. We do get some grants occasionally from different organizations. We have some great organizations in this community that are willing to fund our Young Life and other good organizations. So they support us. But most of it comes from the individual, the person that gives $5 a month.
Wow.
Something like that. And monthly givers, we'd prefer those to, I'll give you $100 at the banquet. Give us, the $25 or the $10 a month or the $25 a month or the $15.
Would I
And
be wrong in guessing that the
helps.
only thing holding it back from getting into more schools would be having a few more people being willing to give $5 a month or whatever it happens to be?
Definitely help.
And that's you help able to recruit new leaders And often people who have been inspired by Young Life themselves.
100%. So you have this blend of staff folks, which we have 2 full-time staff right now and 2 part-time staff. And so we even have some student staff. So when we look at people, the primary determination, although there are many, but that is the finance is a big part of that. So if we have more finances, we can have more people who can focus like this is their full-time job. And then the volunteers come alongside. So.
Awesome. All right. How do we register for this really fun occasion that's taking place July 20th, starting at 4:30 at the Maps Air Museum? 4:30 to however long it goes? Or?
Pretty much. We'll start kicking people out probably by, I think we need to be out by 10. So
okay.
I'm sure there'll be.
Well, for those 70s people, that's probably about right. Yeah.
So I'm so glad you asked, Susie. The best way to do it, the quickest and easiest, is just to go to ylstark.org. YL as in Young Life. So ylstark.org.
That's ylstark.org.
Great, thanks.
Nicely done, Jack. And you'll see right on there. There's a little kind of logo thing. It's our 50th anniversary logo, and there's a button right there that says register, and you can jump on and say I'm coming. And the cool thing is, if you scroll down to the bottom of that Eventbrite page, you'll see who has registered so far, and that's kind of been fun for us to watch and see the numbers jump up and the names flash across the page.
And I think it'd be fun, too, to see who has not registered so far. So get on the horn and start calling all of your friends that you remember going to Young Life with and say, here's an opportunity. Who's going to be there? Give me some names that make it, this is why we want to go.
Go ahead, Jack.
Go ahead.
There's some famous names going to be there.
Kent Pasco? I've been seeing names of people who I haven't seen. Arnie and Lynn Kaufman I haven't seen for a number of years. They were both graduated from Lone University, were involved in Young Life. She worked, I think, administrative assistant for a while. Ken Pasco, I was in when I was a college student, we were in a dinner group that met every night for dinner for a while. He's going to be there.
Wow.
We've got
Dave Kearns Preston.
Yes.
KP.
KP.
You know anything about KP?
I certainly do. KP is going to be there. Okay, that's just amazing.
We have a young lady that was in Young Life years ago who's coming from Thailand to be here.
My.
Yeah, there's some exciting things. And even when I look at the decade leaders, many of those are staff people. So you're looking at Rich and Georgia George are heading up the 70s.
She was my girl leader.
Really?
Yes.
How cool is that?
Yep.
And so then the Wilkses in the 80s and Quigley's and Heath Sizik and Frank Streeter and our current leader and Kaylee Wilcox. And did I miss one?
I don't know, but you've just gone through each decade,
Yeah, I think I just covered that. So yeah, even looking at those, many of those were area directors through those time periods or portions of that time.
So come and see your leaders, come and see your friends from the era. Just come.
It's going to be amazing. All right, again, this is July 20th, Maps Air Museum. It's Young Life's 50th anniversary. Yeah, you are that old. Go to ylstark.org, click on register. It's free. And, we will look forward to seeing you all there. Todd Biss, Jack Harris, thanks for bringing this to our community.
Thanks, Susie.